Rebecca Martinez had dreamed of flying since she was 8 years old, watching military jets streak across the desert sky above her grandmother's ranch in Nevada. 23 years later, she stood in the hallway of Blackstone Aviation Academy, clutching her acceptance letter with trembling hands. The elite flight school had finally opened its doors to women, and Rebecca was among the first 5 females accepted into their prestigious commercial pilot program. The Academy's limestone buildings stretched across manicured lawns, their windows gleaming like aircraft windshields in the morning sun. Rebecca had worked 3 jobs for 4 years to save enough money for tuition, serving tables at midnight diners, cleaning office buildings before dawn, and tutoring high school students in mathematics. Her bank account was now empty, but her determination burned brighter than ever. Walking through the main entrance, Rebecca noticed the walls lined with photographs of graduates who had gone on to fly for major airlines, military squadrons, and private corporations. Every single face was male, their confident smiles seeming to follow her down the corridor. She clutched her flight bag tighter, the weight of her textbooks and navigation equipment a comforting reminder of her preparation. The orientation room buzzed with nervous energy as 43 students gathered for their first day. Rebecca scanned the faces, spotting the other 4 women scattered throughout the crowd. Most of the men wore expensive flight jackets with Family Aviation Company logos, their conversations peppered with casual mentions of private airstrips and inherited aircraft. Rebecca's thrift store flight suit suddenly felt inadequate, but she straightened her shoulders and found an empty seat near the back. Chief Instructor Malcolm Hayes entered the room with the bearing of a military officer, his silver hair perfectly groomed, and his uniform pressed to knife-edge precision. His pale blue eyes swept across the assembled students, lingering momentarily on each of the 5 women before settling on Rebecca, who had unconsciously straightened in her chair. "Welcome to Blackstone Aviation Academy," Hayes announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "You are here because you believe you have what it takes to become professional pilots. I am here to determine whether you're right or whether you're deluding yourselves." He began outlining the rigorous 18-month program, describing flight hours, ground school requirements, and practical examinations that would push students to their limits. Rebecca took meticulous notes, her pen flying across the page as she absorbed every detail. Around her, some students leaned back in their chairs with cocky confidence, while others shifted nervously. "This program has a 73% failure rate," Hayes continued, his gaze once again finding Rebecca. "Those who wash out typically do so because they lack the discipline, intelligence, or natural ability required to handle complex aircraft under pressure. Some of you simply don't belong here." The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure, meeting Hayes' stare with quiet determination. She had fought too hard to get here to be intimidated by veiled threats and outdated attitudes. As the orientation concluded, Rebecca gathered her materials and headed toward the door. She could feel eyes on her back, some curious, others dismissive. The real test was about to begin, and she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The flight simulator building stood at the academy's heart, its glass facade reflecting the afternoon sun like a beacon. Rebecca had dreamed of this moment countless times, imagining herself at the controls of sophisticated aircraft, proving that her gender had nothing to do with her ability to fly. She pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into her future. Inside, the simulator bay hummed with electronic activity. Rows of multi-million-dollar flight simulators lined the floor, their cockpits exact replicas of commercial aircraft from Boeing 737s to Airbus A320s. The sophisticated machines could replicate any weather condition, mechanical failure, or emergency scenario that pilots might encounter in real flight. Rebecca approached her assigned simulator, running her hands along the pristine control surfaces. The instrument panel glowed with dozens of switches, gauges, and digital displays that she had studied obsessively in her preparation. Every button and lever had a purpose. Every warning light could mean the difference between life and death for hundreds of passengers. First time seeing a real cockpit. The voice belonged to Derek Thompson, a tall student whose father owned a regional airline. His tone carried the casual condescension of someone who had grown up around aircraft, taking for granted what Rebecca had worked years to achieve. Actually, I've logged over 200 hours in smaller aircraft, Rebecca replied calmly, not mentioning that those hours had been earned through weekend jobs at a tiny municipal airport, washing planes and doing maintenance in exchange for flight time. Derek laughed, a sound that drew attention from nearby students. Crop dusters and weekend warriors don't count, sweetheart. This is the real deal. These machines will chew you up and spit you out if you're not ready. Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. I guess we'll find out soon enough. As students began their first simulator sessions, Rebecca observed the interactions between instructors and students. The male instructors seemed to gravitate toward the men, offering encouragement and detailed explanations. When they worked with the female students, their tone became more formal, their feedback more critical. Instructor James Patterson approached Rebecca's simulator as she completed her pre-flight checklist. His weathered face bore the lines of someone who had spent decades in aviation, and his reputation for demanding perfection was legendary among students. Ms. Martinez, Patterson said, settling into the instructor's seat beside her. I see you're one of our newer additions to the program. I want you to understand that I don't believe in lowering standards for anyone. You'll be held to the same expectations as every other student." Rebecca nodded, recognizing the subtext but refusing to be baited. "I wouldn't want it any other way, sir." Patterson initiated the simulation, and Rebecca found herself piloting a Boeing 737 through a routine takeoff from Los Angeles International Airport. Her hands moved confidently across the controls, her training and natural instincts working in harmony. The aircraft responded smoothly to her inputs, climbing steadily through the virtual sky. "Not bad," Patterson admitted grudgingly as Rebecca executed a perfect landing at San Francisco International. "But don't get cocky. The real tests are coming." As weeks passed, Rebecca threw herself into her studies with single-minded determination. While other students socialized in the evenings, she remained in the library, memorizing aircraft systems manuals and emergency procedures. Her academic scores consistently ranked in the top 5% of her class, but she noticed that praise came reluctantly from instructors who seemed surprised by her competence. The first major milestone came during month 3, solo flights in actual aircraft. Rebecca had been assigned to fly a Cessna 172, a single-engine trainer that seemed almost toy-like compared to the sophisticated simulators. As she performed her pre-flight inspection, checking every rivet and control surface, she felt a familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness. Chief Instructor Hayes observed from the control tower as Rebecca taxied to the runway. Through his binoculars, he watched her run through the engine checks with methodical precision. Despite his personal reservations about women in aviation, he had to admit that Martinez was technically proficient. Rebecca's voice crackled through the radio. "Tower, Cessna 472 requesting permission for takeoff." "Cessna 472, you are cleared for takeoff. Maintain runway heading. Climb to 3,000 feet." The small aircraft lifted off smoothly, Rebecca's touch on the controls gentle but confident. She had practiced this moment in her mind thousands of times, but actually being alone in the cockpit felt different. The responsibility was entirely hers now, every decision potentially life-altering. During the 30-minute flight, Rebecca performed a series of maneuvers designed to test her basic piloting skills. She executed steep turns, practiced stalls and recoveries, and demonstrated her ability to navigate using only instruments. Each task was completed with textbook precision, her movements economical and purposeful. Landing back at the academy, Rebecca felt a surge of pride as the wheels touched down with barely a bump. She had proven to herself that she belonged here, that all the sacrifices and struggles had been worth it. But as she taxied back to the hangar, She noticed a cluster of male students watching her with expressions ranging from surprise to resentment. The academic portion of the program proved equally challenging. Rebecca excelled in subjects like meteorology, navigation, and aircraft systems, but she noticed that her contributions during group discussions were often overlooked or dismissed. When she offered insights during case study sessions, instructors would nod politely before turning to male students for additional perspectives. During one particularly frustrating seminar on emergency procedures, Rebecca raised her hand to suggest an alternative approach to engine failure scenarios. Her suggestion was based on extensive research and real-world case studies, but instructor Hayes barely acknowledged her before asking Derek Thompson to share his thoughts on the same topic. "That's an interesting point, Thompson," Hayes said, after Derek essentially repeated Rebecca's suggestion with slightly different wording. "Your analytical thinking shows real promise." Rebecca felt her jaw clench but said nothing. She had learned early in the program that challenging instructors directly only led to closer scrutiny and harsher grading. Instead, she channeled her frustration into even more intensive study, determined to prove herself through undeniable competence. The other female students had begun to struggle under the constant pressure and subtle discrimination. Jennifer Walsh, a former Air Force mechanic with extensive technical knowledge, had been repeatedly questioned about her decision to pursue commercial aviation instead of sticking to maintenance work. Sarah Kim, who had graduated summa cum laude with a degree in aerospace engineering, found herself relegated to note-taking roles during group projects. Rebecca watched as one by one her female classmates began to doubt themselves. The constant microaggressions and subtle undermining were taking their toll, and she could see the confidence draining from their eyes. But Rebecca refused to let the toxic environment break her spirit. She had come too far to give up now. By the 6th month, the class had already lost 15 students, including 2 of the 5 women. Rebecca's remaining female classmates, Jennifer and Sarah, had grown increasingly isolated as the male students formed tight-knit groups that excluded them from study sessions and social gatherings. Rebecca tried to organize alternative study groups, but the women were often too exhausted from fighting daily battles to maintain their academic performance. The simulator training had progressed to more complex aircraft, including the Airbus A320 and Boeing 777. These modern jets required sophisticated understanding of computerized flight systems, and Rebecca found herself naturally adapting to the technology. Her background in mathematics and her methodical approach to learning gave her an advantage in understanding the intricate relationships between various aircraft systems. During a particularly challenging simulation involving multiple system failures, Rebecca demonstrated her ability to think clearly under pressure. As alarms blared and warning lights flashed across the instrument panel, she systematically diagnosed the problems and executed appropriate emergency procedures. Her calm demeanor and logical approach impressed even the most skeptical instructors. "Interesting technique, Martinez," commented Instructor Patterson after Rebecca successfully landed a simulated aircraft with failed hydraulics and reduced electrical power. "Where did you learn to prioritize emergency procedures like that?" Rebecca looked up from the simulator controls, her face flushed with concentration. "I studied every emergency checklist until I could recite them from memory, sir. Then I practiced different failure combinations until the responses became automatic." Patterson nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. For the first time since Rebecca had started the program, she sensed a grudging respect from one of her instructors. The moment was brief, but it gave her hope that her competence might eventually overcome the prejudices she faced daily. As the program entered its final third, the pressure intensified dramatically. Students were now flying complex multi-engine aircraft and preparing for their commercial pilot certification exams. The workload was crushing, requiring mastery of advanced navigation systems, weather interpretation, and crew resource management principles. Rebecca had emerged as one of the top students in her class, her test scores consistently ranking in the top 3 despite the additional obstacles she faced. But she noticed that her achievements were often attributed to luck or excessive studying rather than natural ability. When Derek Thompson scored well on exams, instructors praised his instinctive understanding of aviation principles. When Rebecca achieved similar or better results, they commented on her dedication to memorization. The discrimination was becoming more obvious as the program neared its conclusion. Rebecca had applied for several internship opportunities with major airlines, but her applications were consistently rejected despite her superior academic record. Meanwhile, male students with lower grades were being accepted into prestigious programs with major carriers. The breaking point came during the advanced jet training phase. The Academy had acquired a former military fighter jet, an F-16 that had been converted for civilian training purposes. The aircraft was notoriously difficult to fly, requiring exceptional skill and reflexes to handle safely. Only the top 10 students in each class were allowed to attempt flying it, and success was considered the ultimate achievement for any Blackstone graduate. Rebecca's academic performance clearly qualified her for the opportunity, but when the list of selected students was posted, her name was conspicuously absent. All 10 spots had been awarded to male students, including several who ranked lower than Rebecca in both academic and practical evaluations. Furious but determined to maintain her composure, Rebecca approached Chief Instructor Hayes during his office hours. His office was a shrine to aviation achievement, with model aircraft lining the shelves and photographs of him, with famous pilots covering the walls. Behind his desk hung his own military commendations and civilian aviation awards. "Sir, I'd like to discuss the F-16 training selection," Rebecca began, her voice carefully controlled. "I believe there may have been an oversight in my application." Hayes looked up from his paperwork, his expression neutral. "Ms. Martinez, the selection process is based on multiple factors beyond simple academic performance. We consider overall readiness, psychological profile, and leadership potential. With respect, sir, could you explain how my psychological profile or leadership potential differs from students who scored lower on both written and practical examinations?" Hayes set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "The F-16 is an extremely demanding aircraft. It requires split-second decision-making, physical strength, and mental resilience that, frankly, we're not certain all students possess." The selection committee felt that the chosen candidates had demonstrated the specific qualities necessary for success. Rebecca felt her hands clench into fists, but kept them at her sides. "Are you suggesting that my gender affects my ability to make decisions or handle stress?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Ms. Martinez. I'm stating facts about aircraft performance requirements and selection criteria. If you have concerns about the process, you're welcome to file a formal complaint with the Academy administration." Rebecca left Hayes' office with her jaw set in determination. She knew that filing a formal complaint would likely result in even more scrutiny and potential retaliation. Instead, she decided to pursue a different approach. She would find a way to prove her capabilities beyond any doubt. That evening, Rebecca researched the F-16 training program extensively. She discovered that the aircraft was scheduled for maintenance flights every Tuesday and Thursday, piloted by certified instructors to ensure all systems remained operational. These flights were typically routine, lasting about an hour, and following predetermined routes around the Academy's airspace. Rebecca also learned that the Academy's insurance policy required 2 qualified pilots for all F-16 flights, but recent instructor scheduling conflicts had sometimes left them short-staffed. When such situations arose, flights were typically canceled rather than risk safety violations. An idea began to form in Rebecca's mind. She started staying late in the flight operations office, volunteering to help with scheduling and maintenance coordination. Her helpful attitude and attention to detail made her indispensable to the overworked administrative staff, and she gradually gained access to detailed flight schedules and maintenance records. 3 weeks after her conversation with Hayes, Rebecca's opportunity arrived. A scheduling conflict had left the Academy without a qualified co-pilot for a routine F-16 maintenance flight. The primary pilot, Instructor Patterson, was certified to fly the aircraft, but regulations required a second qualified pilot in the cockpit. Rebecca was in the operations office when Patterson arrived, clearly frustrated by the situation. "This is the third time this month we've had to cancel a maintenance flight," he muttered to the scheduling coordinator. "The aircraft needs these flights to maintain certification, but we can't seem to keep our instructor schedules coordinated." "Sir," Rebecca said quietly, "I'm certified for multi-engine complex aircraft, and I've logged over 400 hours in high-performance planes. Would I be qualified to serve as co-pilot for a maintenance flight?" Patterson looked at her with surprise. "You'd need specific authorization from the chief instructor, and frankly, I'm not sure he'd approve it." "What if I took full responsibility for requesting the authorization? If he says no, we cancel the flight as planned. If he says yes, the aircraft gets its required maintenance flight." Patterson considered this for a moment. The F-16 was one of the Academy's most valuable assets, and canceled maintenance flights were becoming a serious administrative issue. "I suppose it wouldn't hurt to ask," he said finally. Rebecca drafted a formal request to Chief Instructor Hayes, carefully wording it to emphasize the operational necessity and her relevant qualifications. She hand-delivered the memo to his office, then waited anxiously for his response. Hayes' reply came the next morning. "Request approved for maintenance flight only. Co-pilot role limited to standard checklist duties and emergency backup. Any deviation from approved flight plan will result in immediate program termination." Rebecca felt her heart racing as she read the authorization. This was her chance to prove herself in the most challenging aircraft the Academy owned. She spent the entire day reviewing F-16 systems manuals and emergency procedures, determined to be perfectly prepared for the opportunity. The morning of the flight, Rebecca arrived at the hangar before dawn. The F-16 stood gleaming under the fluorescent lights, its sleek profile a testament to advanced aeronautical engineering. She had dreamed of flying such an aircraft since childhood, but seeing it up close made her realize the magnitude of the challenge ahead. Patterson arrived shortly after, carrying his flight bag and wearing an expression of nervous concentration. "Ready for this, Martinez?" he asked, his tone more serious than usual. "Yes, sir. I've reviewed all the procedures and I'm prepared to assist however needed." The pre-flight inspection took nearly an hour, with both pilots methodically checking every system and control surface. The F-16 was far more complex than anything Rebecca had flown before, but her extensive preparation had familiarized her with the aircraft's unique characteristics. As they strapped into the cockpit, Rebecca felt a surge of adrenaline. The pilot's seat was positioned for maximum visibility and control, with instruments and switches arranged within easy reach. Everything about the aircraft screamed performance and precision. "Remember," Patterson said through the intercom, "this is a routine maintenance flight. We'll climb to 15,000 feet, perform some basic maneuvers to test system responses, then return to base. Keep your hands near the controls, but don't touch anything unless I specifically request it." Rebecca nodded, her eyes scanning the instrument panel as Patterson initiated the engine start sequence. The powerful turbofan engine spooled up with a rising whine that vibrated through the airframe. Every gauge and indicator confirmed that the aircraft was operating within normal parameters. Tower Falcon 1, requesting taxi clearance for maintenance flight. Falcon 1, taxi to runway 27, winds 280 at 15 knots. You are cleared for takeoff. As they taxied toward the runway, Rebecca noticed several students and instructors gathered near the control tower, apparently curious about the F-16 flight. She spotted Chief Instructor Hayes among them, his binoculars trained on the aircraft. "Falcon 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Maintain runway heading, climb to 15,000 feet." Patterson advanced the throttles, and the F-16 accelerated down the runway with startling power. Rebecca felt herself pressed back into her seat as the aircraft quickly reached rotation speed. The moment the wheels left the ground, she understood why this plane was considered the ultimate test of piloting skill. The climb to 15,000 feet took less than 3 minutes, the F-16's powerful engine easily overcoming gravity and air resistance. Rebecca monitored the instruments carefully, calling out altitude and airspeed readings as they ascended through the clear morning sky. "Leveling off at 15,000, Patterson announced. "Now we'll run through some basic maneuvers to test control response and system integration." For the next 20 minutes, Patterson performed a series of turns, climbs, and descents designed to verify that all aircraft systems were functioning properly. Rebecca observed every movement, noting how the sophisticated flight controls responded to pilot inputs. The F-16 flew like a precision instrument, every control surface working in harmony to maintain perfect flight characteristics. "Looking good," Patterson commented as they completed the planned maneuvers. "All systems are operating within normal parameters. We'll head back to base now." As Patterson began the descent toward the academy, Rebecca noticed something unusual on the engine temperature gauge. The reading was still within normal limits, but it was climbing gradually toward the caution range. "Sir, I'm seeing a slight temperature increase on the engine gauge," she reported. Patterson glanced at the indicator, frowning. It's still in the green, but you're right about the trend. Keep monitoring it. Within 2 minutes, the engine temperature had climbed into the caution range, and warning lights began flashing on the instrument panel. Patterson's expression grew serious as he realized they were dealing with a potentially serious mechanical problem. "Engine overheat warning," he announced. "We need to reduce power and get this aircraft on the ground immediately." Patterson pulled back on the throttles, but the engine temperature continued to climb. Additional warning lights illuminated the cockpit as various systems began to react to the overheating condition. Rebecca could see sweat beading on Patterson's forehead as he worked through the emergency procedures. "Tower, Falcon 1 declaring emergency. We have engine overheat and need immediate clearance for straighten approach to runway 27. Falcon 1, you are cleared for emergency approach. Emergency vehicles are rolling." As they descended toward the airport, the situation continued to deteriorate. The engine temperature had reached critical levels, and the aircraft's flight management system was automatically reducing power to prevent catastrophic failure. This left them with barely enough thrust to maintain controlled flight. Patterson struggled with the degraded controls as the F-16 began to lose altitude faster than planned. Rebecca could see the runway ahead, but their approach angle was too steep, and their airspeed was decreasing rapidly. "I'm losing control authority," Patterson said, his voice tight with concentration. "The engine's not responding properly, and we're sinking too fast." Rebecca watched the instruments with growing alarm. They were approaching the minimum controllable airspeed, and the runway was still over a mile away. If they didn't regain control soon, they would crash short of the airport. "Sir, request permission to take controls," Rebecca said, her voice steady despite the critical situation. Patterson looked at her in surprise. "This isn't a training scenario, Martinez. This is a real emergency." "I understand, sir, but I've studied every emergency procedure for this aircraft, and I think I can get us down safely." The aircraft shuddered as they fell through another 100 feet of altitude. Patterson's hands were white-knuckled on the control stick, but Rebecca could see that his efforts were having minimal effect. The F-16 was on the edge of an unrecoverable stall, and they were running out of time. "Your aircraft," Patterson said finally, releasing the controls to Rebecca. Rebecca immediately felt the difference in the aircraft's behavior. The controls were mushy and unresponsive, requiring constant adjustment to maintain even basic flight control. But her extensive study had prepared her for exactly this situation. Instead of fighting the degraded engine, Rebecca used the F-16's inherent aerodynamic efficiency to stretch their glide. She lowered the nose slightly to maintain airspeed, trading altitude for control authority. The maneuver was counterintuitive but necessary to prevent a complete loss of control. "What are you doing?" Patterson asked, his voice sharp with concern. "Trading altitude for energy," Rebecca replied, her hands steady on the controls. "If we can maintain minimum controllable airspeed, we can glide to the runway." The approach required split-second timing and precise control inputs. Rebecca had to balance airspeed, altitude, and power carefully, making constant adjustments as the compromised engine struggled to provide even minimal thrust. Too fast and they would overshoot the runway. Too slow and they would stall and crash. With 500 feet remaining, Rebecca began the final approach phase. The runway looked impossibly narrow from their steep angle, but she knew the F-16's landing characteristics would help them once they reached the ground effect zone. "Falcon 1, you are cleared to land. Emergency vehicles standing by." Rebecca flared the aircraft at precisely the right moment, bleeding off excess speed while maintaining just enough energy to reach the runway. The main landing gear touched down with a solid thump, and she deployed the drag chute to help slow the aircraft. As they rolled to a stop, Patterson looked at her with undisguised amazement. "That was the most skilled piece of flying I've ever witnessed," he said quietly. "You just saved both our lives." Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft as they shut down the engine and completed the emergency checklist. Rebecca's hands were shaking slightly as the adrenaline began to wear off, but she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. When they climbed out of the cockpit, they were met by Chief Instructor Hayes and several other Academy officials. Hayes' expression was unreadable as he approached Rebecca. "Ms. Martinez, I need a complete report on what happened up there," he said formally. "Yes, sir. Instructor Patterson can provide the details, but we experienced engine overheat followed by power loss. I assisted with the emergency landing as requested." Hayes nodded slowly, his eyes moving between Rebecca and Patterson. "I watched the entire approach from the tower. That was some exceptional flying." Over the next few days, word of Rebecca's emergency landing spread throughout the academy. Students and instructors who had previously dismissed her abilities now looked at her with new respect. The incident had demonstrated beyond any doubt that she possessed the skills and judgment necessary to handle the most challenging situations. The maintenance investigation revealed that the F-16 had suffered a critical engine component failure that could have resulted in catastrophic loss of the aircraft. Rebecca's quick thinking and skilled piloting had prevented not only their deaths, but also the loss of a multi-million-dollar aircraft. Patterson submitted a formal commendation for Rebecca's actions, praising her technical knowledge, decision-making under pressure, and exceptional flying skills. The report was forwarded to the Academy's board of directors and became part of Rebecca's permanent record. Chief Instructor Hayes called Rebecca to his office a week after the incident. His demeanor was markedly different from their previous encounters, showing a grudging respect that had been absent before. "Ms. Martinez, I owe you an apology," he began, his voice formal but sincere. "I allowed my personal biases to cloud my judgment regarding your capabilities. What you accomplished in that F-16 was remarkable, and it has forced me to reconsider my assumptions." Rebecca sat quietly, allowing Hayes to continue. "I'm recommending you for the Advanced Jet Training Program, with full access to all aircraft in our fleet. Your emergency landing demonstrated pilot skills that exceed those of most of our graduates." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to prove myself." Hayes leaned forward, his expression serious. "You've already proven yourself, Martinez. What you did required not just technical skill, but the kind of judgment and composure that can't be taught. You're going to make an exceptional pilot." The news of Rebecca's acceptance into the advanced program spread quickly through the academy. Male students who had previously ignored or dismissed her now sought her out for study groups and advice. The transformation was remarkable, but Rebecca remained focused on her goals rather than savoring the recognition. With access to the full range of Academy aircraft, Rebecca threw herself into advanced training with renewed determination. She flew everything from complex multi-engine transports to high-performance jets, mastering each aircraft's unique characteristics and limitations. Her reputation as an exceptional pilot continued to grow as she consistently demonstrated superior skills across all types of aircraft. Instructors who had once questioned her abilities now competed to work with her, recognizing that her analytical approach and natural flying ability made her an outstanding student. The final phase of the program involved comprehensive testing across all aspects of commercial aviation. Rebecca excelled in every area, from technical knowledge to practical flying skills. Her scores consistently ranked at the top of her class, and her emergency landing had become legendary among Academy staff. As graduation approached, Rebecca found herself fielding job offers from major airlines that had previously rejected her applications. The same companies that had once dismissed her now recognized her exceptional qualifications and were eager to hire her. On graduation day, Rebecca stood before the assembled crowd of students, faculty, and family members. She was awarded not only her commercial pilot certification, but also the Academy's highest honor for exceptional achievement in aviation training. Chief Instructor Hayes presented her with the award, his voice carrying genuine pride as he recounted her accomplishments. Ms. Martinez has demonstrated that skill and determination know no gender boundaries. She has earned the respect of her instructors and classmates through her exceptional abilities and her grace under pressure. Rebecca accepted the award with quiet dignity, knowing that her journey was far from over. The aviation industry still faced significant challenges in achieving true equality, but her success had opened doors for future generations of female pilots. As she looked out at the audience, Rebecca saw her grandmother in the front row, tears streaming down her weathered face. The woman who had first inspired her love of flying by pointing out jets in the desert sky was now witnessing the fulfillment of that childhood dream. After the ceremony, Rebecca was approached by Captain Linda Stevens, a senior pilot with United Airlines who had flown to the academy specifically to meet her. Stevens was one of the few female captains in commercial aviation, and her presence at the graduation was a testament to Rebecca's growing reputation. "I've been following your progress," Stevens said, extending her hand. "That emergency landing was talked about at crew meetings across the industry. You've got a standing offer with United whenever you're ready to start your career." Rebecca shook Stephen's hand firmly. "I appreciate the opportunity, Captain. I'm ready to begin whenever you need me." "Good. Report to Denver next Monday for orientation. You'll start as a first officer on domestic routes, but I have a feeling you'll be upgrading to captain faster than most." As Rebecca packed her belongings and prepared to leave the academy, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The discrimination and obstacles she had faced had only made her stronger and more determined to succeed. The other female students had completed the program as well, though their paths had been more difficult. Jennifer Walsh had been hired by a regional carrier, while Sarah Kim had chosen to work for a corporate flight department. Each had found their own way to success despite the challenges they faced. Rebecca's final act at the academy was to establish a scholarship fund for future female students. Using her signing bonus from United Airlines to provide financial assistance for women pursuing aviation careers. She wanted to ensure that lack of resources would not prevent other determined women from achieving their dreams. As she drove away from Blackstone Aviation Academy for the last time, Rebecca felt a sense of profound satisfaction. She had proven that gender was irrelevant to piloting ability, and her success would inspire others to follow their dreams regardless of the obstacles they faced. The aviation industry was slowly changing, driven by pioneers like Rebecca, who refused to accept limitations based on outdated stereotypes. Every successful flight she completed would serve as evidence that skill and determination were the only qualifications that truly mattered. Rebecca Martinez had transformed from an ignored applicant into a celebrated pilot, proving that excellence speaks louder than prejudice. Her story would inspire future generations of aviators, both male and female, to pursue their dreams with unwavering determination. The jets she had watched as a child in the Nevada desert were now her workplace, and the sky that had once seemed impossibly distant was now her domain. She had earned her place among the clouds through hard work, skill, and the courage to prove herself when others doubted her abilities. As she began her career with United Airlines, Rebecca carried with her the lessons learned during her time at the academy. She had discovered that respect must be earned through competence and professionalism, and that persistence in the face of adversity could overcome even the most entrenched prejudices. The story of Rebecca Martinez became a legend in aviation circles, inspiring countless others to pursue their dreams regardless of the obstacles they faced. Her emergency landing in the F-16 was studied in training programs around the world, serving as an example of exceptional piloting skill and judgment under pressure. Years later, as Captain Rebecca Martinez commanded flights across the globe, she would remember the day she first walked into Blackstone Aviation Academy. The young woman who had been ignored and dismissed had become one of the most respected pilots in commercial aviation, proving that determination and skill could overcome any barrier. Her journey from overlooked student to celebrated captain demonstrated that true excellence cannot be suppressed by prejudice or discrimination. Rebecca Martinez had not only achieved her own dreams, but had also paved the way for others to follow, ensuring that the skies would be open to all who possessed the skill and determination to fly.